Hi, my name is Mercedes Rossi, and I am one of the ESSA consultants here at Region 15, and I'm going to talk to you today about Title V. Title V can be referred to in many ways, REAP, SRSA, RLIS, but I'm going to kind of demystify the different terms that we use to refer to Title V, and then also explain a little bit about eligibility for the grants that are included under this provision. So Title V, the Rural Education Achievement Program, REAP, is a program designed to help rural districts use federal resources more effectively in order to address their needs. And so the programs that are set out by Title V are to allow our rural districts more flexibility with their federal funds. And we'll see that there are three ways that this happens. The first is REAP, which is a flexibility granted to rural and low income districts to be able to use their federal resources more effectively. And we'll talk about what that looks like in a little bit. The second is a grant program referred to as SRSA. SRSA is one of the two grant programs authorized under REAP. And the second grant program that's authorized under REAP is RLIS. So we're going to talk about those two grant programs and also what it means to reap your funds. So first, let's talk about eligibility. Certain districts are eligible for REAP flexibility, and those districts are notified through TEA. TEA, when it releases its ESSA consolidated application annually, also releases a REAP eligible list. And on that list, you will see if your district is eligible for REAP, RLIS, or it might say something called dual eligible. Dual eligible means you get to pick. Do you want to do SRSA or do you want to do RLIS? Regardless of whether it says RLIS, SRSA, or dual eligible, if your name or the name of your district is included on that list, you are considered REAP eligible. You're eligible to participate in the Rural Education Achievement Program. So regardless if you apply for those separate pots of money that we talked about in the previous slide, SRSA or RLIS, you can still use the REAP flexibility. And so REAP flexibility means that you have what's called Alternative Fund Use Authority. Alternative Fund Use Authority allows you to take your Title II and Title IV funds and to REAP into Title I, meaning those funds remain in their buckets, so they would remain in their 270 fund code, but you're able to use them as if programmatically they were Title I funds. And as you all know, Title II and Title IV are a little bit more restrictive in terms of their allowable uses. They're more restrictive in terms of their SNS, their suppositions of supplement, not supplant. And so for rural schools, being able to use those funds as Title I funds allows them a lot of flexibility because it kind of opens up and broadens their intended use. And so you'll see here there are eligible programs that you can use these funds for. And I have those listed there. And then what you might realize is that, okay, so you're telling me I can reap funds, but it sounds just like transfer. Transfer is also a flexibility that you're able to do with your ESSA funds, where you would take, let's say, your Title IV funds and transfer them into Title I. And so now they can be used as Title I funds. So what's the difference? Why is REAP special? Well, technically, when you transfer funds, those funds actually become subject to the program's requirements that they're being transferred into. REAP doesn't necessarily work in that way. And so for most of our districts, actually all the districts in Region 15, they all either REAP or transfer Title II or Title IV funds. If they do REAP or transfer, they do all REAP or transfer those funds into Title I. Not all of the districts REAP or transfer, but if they do, they tend to put that into a Title I bucket. But one thing that we remember about Title I is that Title I has a 15% carryover limit. And so transferred funds are subject to that 15% carryover limit, which means that now the money that you had in Title II and Title IV is also subject to that 15% carryover limit, whereas REAP funds don't have that requirement. So that's one of the benefits of being able to being REAP eligible versus being versus the transfer flexibility that all districts receive, is that you're not subject to the Title I 15% carryover rule. So REAP, like I said, it can be a verb or it can be a noun. REAP as a noun refers to the Rural Education Achievement Program, which is kind of the umbrella term for all of these elements that I'm speaking about in this presentation. But it's also the verb in the sense that if you are considered eligible, you are able to reap funds from one program into another. So now let's talk about SRSA. SRSA is one of the other programs authorized under REAP. SRSA is one of two grant programs. There's SRSA and there's RLIS. Remember when I talked about the eligibility list that TEA publishes where it says either SRSA eligible, RLIS eligible, or dual eligible? When that eligibility list becomes available, districts can see, okay, I'm eligible for either SRSA, RLIS, or dual eligible. If you're dual eligible, that means you're eligible for both. But the program requires that you only apply for one of those grants. So how do you decide which grant you want to apply for? Well, SRSA is actually a grant that's a little bit unique in that when it comes to schools, it's basically, it comes directly from the federal government. Usually TEA is like a pass-through entity for a lot of our federal grants that you would receive in your school. But in this case, there is no pass-through entity for SRSA. So what happens is that usually in the spring, once that eligibility list is published by TEA, USDE simultaneously publishes a list that gives projected entitlements for whether you would receive SRSA funds, RLIS funds, or if you're dual eligible, it would show you projected entitlements for both programs. I will say Tammy and I usually do a very good job of sending those entitlements out to you all so that you can see what you're eligible for and you can kind of compare and contrast amounts so you can decide which you apply for. If you decide to apply for SRSA, the allowable uses are listed here. So you can basically use these funds to carry out any activities that would be authorized under the listed programs. So it's really broad what you can use them for. But I'll say to you all, that's about all I know about SRSA because, like I said, uniquely, this is one of the only grants where you don't work with TEA or we don't necessarily work with you to get this grant application done. You apply directly through USDE, and USDE usually sends the application via email. They send notifications via email to superintendents who have applied previously. But as much as possible, TEA gives notification for us to let our districts know to be expecting that. But if you are one of those districts that is listed as having projected entitlement and you don't hear anything, I've listed here the email for reaching out to USDE so that you can receive more information. Also, if your superintendent has changed, maybe your business managers have changed, in the spring would be a good time to reach out to this email address and just make sure that the right contacts are listed so that you would receive the SRSA application from USDE. So again, SRSA is a little bit unique in that you don't go through eGrants, you don't go through TEA to receive these funds, you receive them directly from USDE. So SRSA is one of the grant programs authorized under REAP. RLIS is the other grant program authorized through REAP. So again, that eligibility list would show you whether or not you're eligible for SRSA, RLIS, or dual eligible once you decide which application you're going to apply for. And the initial application is SRSA. That comes out early spring from USDE. USDE then turns around and kind of gives a list to TEA. I'm sure it's more official than just a written list, but they give a list to TEA showing these eligible districts applied for SRSA. TEA takes the RLIS eligible districts and those districts that maybe were dual eligible but did not apply for SRSA, and then creates entitlements based off of that list. So this application comes out a little bit later than that SRSA application would come out. It usually comes out around September. So if you look at like your ESSA grant cycle, you're usually looking at ESSA entitlements around March, April. You do your grant application before July 1st, and then September is usually when your RLIS application and entitlements will come out. And that delay is there simply because TEA waits to see which districts applied for SRSA, so then they can clean up their list and then only send RLIS applications and entitlements to those districts that are eligible and did not apply for SRSA. And again, you see the allowable uses of funds, carry out activities authorized under those programs. What's nice about RLIS is that you do work directly with TEA to complete this grant application. So it's basically treated like any of your other federal grants where TEA is the pass-through entity. You receive notification of entitlements on TEA's website. You would do your grant application through eGrants, and then you draw down funds like you would for all of your federal grant awards in expenditure reports. So it's a little bit easier because you're more familiar with, I think, this process, whereas SRSA has a unique process that's a little bit elusive to me, I'll be honest. But also here at Region 15, if you're a part of our SRS support contract, we can actually do this RLIS application on your behalf. So, like I said, that was a brief introduction into REAP as a program. This is not comprehensive whatsoever. So just know there's tons more of information that I'm willing to share, or if you have follow-up questions, I'm happy to help with. But I hope this gave you some clarification in regard to both programs, our SRSA and RLIS, and clarification in regards to what it means to REAP funds. And yeah, there's my email address, and please contact me with any questions. I'll post the link to this presentation in the description of this video so that you can access these slides and click the links that I have within the presentation. Thanks. Bye.